High Sovereign Kethril sat upon his throne and watched the stars burn on the great viewing screen before him. His scales were dark green, almost black, and they shimmered under the cold lights of the command chamber. He was old by Velkari standards. He had conquered 12 worlds. He had crushed rebellions and silenced enemies. Nothing in the galaxy frightened him anymore. The throne room of the Bone Citadel was built from the skeletons of fallen enemies. This was the Velkari way. When you defeated someone, you took their bones and built something beautiful from them. It reminded everyone who entered that the Velkari Dominion did not lose. It could not lose. It was the natural order of things. Admiral Kethsul, the High Sovereign's nephew, walked into the chamber and knelt before the throne. His armor was polished and his eyes were eager. He was young and hungry for glory. "My lord," he said, "the scouts have returned from the Outer Veil." Kethril leaned forward slightly. The Outer Veil was a distant region of space, far from the great empires. It was filled with empty worlds and dying stars. Nobody important lived there. What did they find? A new species, my lord. They call themselves humans. They have established a colony on the 4th planet of the Kepler 442 system. The High Sovereign made a sound that might have been a laugh. Humans? I have never heard this name. They are young, my lord. They have only been traveling between stars for 200 of their years. They are soft. Soft? Admiral Kethsul brought up an image on the viewing screen. It showed a human female holding a small human child. They were standing in a field of golden crops. The sun was setting behind them, and they were smiling. Kethril studied the image carefully. The creatures had no scales, no claws, no armor of any kind. Their skin looked thin and fragile, like it would tear at the slightest touch. Their teeth were small and flat. Their eyes were round and wet. "These are the humans?" he asked. "Yes, my lord. They are mammals. They nurse their young. They require sleep for nearly 1/3 of each day. They cannot survive in extreme temperatures. They have no natural weapons." The High Sovereign laughed again, and this time other officers in the chamber laughed with him. "They sound like prey animals. How have they survived this long?" "Unknown, my lord. But there is something else." Admiral Kethsul hesitated. "The Galactic Council has issued a warning about them." The laughter stopped. The Galactic Council was an ancient organization. It had existed for millions of years, long before the Velkari had even learned to make fire. The Council did not involve itself in the affairs of younger races. It simply watched and recorded. "What warning?" Kethril demanded. Kethsul read from his datapad. "Do not engage the Terrans. Do not provoke them. Do not allow them reason to remember what they are. This warning carries the highest priority. This warning is not negotiable." Silence filled the throne room. The officers looked at each other with confusion in their eyes. Then Kethril began to laugh once more. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed off the bone walls. "The council has grown old and afraid. They see shadows everywhere. Look at these creatures." He pointed at the image of the human mother and child. "They are farmers. They grow food in dirt. They are nothing, my lord," said an old advisor named Vethran. "Perhaps we should be cautious. The council has never issued such a warning before. In all the millions of years of recorded history, they have never told anyone to avoid a species completely." Kethril turned his cold eyes toward the advisor. "Are you afraid, Vethran? Has your blood grown thin with age?" The old advisor lowered his head. "I am simply careful, my lord. Careful is another word for weak." The High Sovereign stood from his throne. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, and his presence filled the room like a storm. "The Velkari do not hide from farmers and their children. We do not run from creatures without claws." He turned to Admiral Kethsul. "Take the 3rd Fleet to Kepler 442b. Remove the humans from that world. I want no survivors. I want the galaxy to see that the Velkari Dominion does not share territory with prey animals." Admiral Kethsul smiled with all of his sharp teeth. "It will be done, my lord." The 3rd Fleet departed 3 days later. It consisted of 40 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to burn a continent. They traveled through folded space and arrived at Kepler 442b in less than a week. The human colony was exactly as the scouts had described. It was a simple farming settlement built near a river. There were homes made of wood and stone. There were fields of crops stretching toward the horizon. There were schools and hospitals and markets. 30,000 humans lived there, building their small lives under an alien sun. They had no warships. They had no planetary defense systems. They had a few security officers with simple weapons, but nothing that could scratch the armor of a Valkyrie cruiser. Admiral Keth Sewell gave them no warning. He did not ask them to surrender. He simply ordered his fleet to open fire. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. The Valkyrie were thorough. They burned the fields first, then the buildings, then the forests where survivors might try to hide. They sent ground troops to hunt down anyone who had escaped the initial attack. They found families hiding in basements. They found children crying in the ruins of their schools. They found old people praying to gods that did not answer. When it was finished, the planet was silent. Smoke rose from the ashes of 30,000 lives. Admiral Keth Sewell recorded a message and sent it to the human homeworld, a small blue planet called Earth. "This is the fate of all who stand in the path of the Valkyrie Dominion," he said. "Your kind is weak. Your kind is prey. Accept this truth and stay in your own system, or we will come for you next." He thought the message would bring fear. He thought the humans would weep and beg and hide. Instead, something strange happened. The humans received the message. Every screen on Earth played the footage of the burning colony. Every man, woman, and child saw the bodies of their people lying in the ashes. They saw the Valkyrie soldiers laughing as they walked through the ruins. And then the humans went quiet. They did not send angry messages. They did not demand justice from the Galactic Council. They did not form protest movements or hold memorials. They simply stopped talking to the rest of the galaxy entirely. Far across the stars, in the ancient halls of the Galactic Council, the eldest beings in the universe felt a chill run through their ancient bones. They knew that silence. They had heard it before, millions of years ago, when humanity was still young and wild and dangerous. It was the silence of a predator that had finally found its prey, and the Valkyrie had no idea what was coming. 3 months passed after the destruction of Kepler 442b. The Valkyrie Dominion celebrated their victory with great feasts and ceremonies. Admiral Keth Sewell was given medals and titles. Songs were written about the glorious cleansing of the human colony. High Sovereign Kethril declared that the Outer Veil now belonged to the Dominion forever. But something was wrong. The humans had not responded. Not once. Not a single message. Not a single ship. Not a single word. Their borders remained closed. Their communication channels remained silent. It was as if they had simply accepted their defeat and decided to hide in their home system forever. At first, the Valkyrie laughed about this. They said it proved that humans were cowards. They said the prey animals had learned their place. They said the galaxy would remember this lesson for generations to come. But as the weeks turned into months, the laughter began to fade. Ambassador Yithra of the Conclave requested an audience with High Sovereign Kethril. The Conclave was an old alliance of peaceful species who traded goods and knowledge across the galaxy. Yithra herself was a tall, thin creature with silver skin and large black eyes. Her people had been traveling the stars for over 100,000 years. She stood before the throne of bones and showed no fear. "High Sovereign," she said, "I have come to deliver a warning." Kethril waved his clawed hand dismissively. "We have already heard the warnings of the Galactic Council. They mean nothing. This warning is not from the Council. It is from me, personally, and from every species old enough to remember the truth about humanity." Yithra's voice was calm and steady. "You have made a terrible mistake." The High Sovereign's eyes narrowed. "Choose your next words carefully, Ambassador. You do not understand what you have done. You look at humans and you see soft skin and small teeth. You see creatures who sleep and eat and grow food in soil. You think they are weak because they do not look like predators." She paused. "But you are wrong. They have sent no response," Kethril said. "They cower in their system like frightened children. They are not cowering. They are preparing." Yithra took a step closer to the throne. "When humans go silent, it means they have stopped seeing you as someone to negotiate with. When they stop talking, they have decided that you are no longer worth their words. They are not building peace. They are building war." Admiral Keth Sewell laughed from his position beside the throne. "Let them build. We have 400 warships. We have conquered 40 systems. What can farmers do against the might of the Valkyrie Dominion?" Yithra turned her dark eyes toward him. "Do you know how humans became the dominant species on their planet? They were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. They had no venom, no claws, no armor. But they had something else, something terrible. And what was that? Kethsul asked mockingly. Patience. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Humans are persistence hunters. On their homeworld, they would choose an animal to kill and then follow it. Not chase it, follow it. For hours, for days, they would walk after it while it ran. They would track it while it tried to hide. They did not need to be faster. They just needed to never stop. She looked back at Kethral. The animal would run until its heart gave out. It would collapse from exhaustion and fear. And then the humans would catch up and finish what they had started. This is what humans do. They pick their target, and they never, ever, stop. The throne room had grown very quiet. You destroyed 30,000 of their people, Yithra continued. You killed their children. You burned their homes. And now you wonder why they have gone silent. She shook her head slowly. They have not gone silent because they are afraid. They have gone silent because they are hunting you. And they will not stop until this is finished. Far away, in the Sol system, humanity worked. Every factory that had once made cars and computers now made warships. Every laboratory that had studied medicine now designed weapons. Every university that had taught art and history now trained soldiers. The entire species had turned itself toward a single purpose, and that purpose was revenge. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in a shipyard on Mars and watched the skeleton of a new battleship take shape. She was 34 years old. She had brown skin and black hair cut short for combat. Her eyes were dark and hard, like stones that had been polished by grief. Her sister had lived on Kepler 442b. Her sister's children had lived there too. 2 boys, ages 7 and 9. They had liked to play in the wheat fields and catch insects in glass jars. They had wanted to be explorers when they grew up. Now they were ash. Elena had received the news 3 months ago. She had watched the footage of the attack. She had seen Velkari soldiers walking through the ruins of her sister's home. She had heard Admiral Kethsul's mocking message. She had not cried. She had not screamed. She had simply walked to the nearest recruitment center and signed her name on the line. Now she commanded a crew of 200 soldiers, and every single one of them had lost someone in the attack. Every single one of them had watched the same footage and made the same choice. The United Terran Assembly had called an emergency session 1 week after the attack. Representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered to discuss the response. Some had called for diplomacy. Some had called for caution. Some had pointed out that the Velkari Dominion was vast and powerful and dangerous. And then Elena Vasquez had stood up and walked to the podium. She had not been invited to speak. She was just a captain, nobody important. But something in her eyes had made the guards step aside. She had looked out at the assembled leaders of humanity and spoken 6 words that changed everything. They took our children. We take everything. The chamber had exploded with applause. Within hours, every nation on Earth had signed the declaration of war. Within days, the factories had begun their transformation. Within weeks, the first new warships had rolled off the assembly lines. Now, 3 months later, humanity was almost ready. The Velkari did not know it yet, but their empire was already dead. They just had not fallen down yet. On the last day of the 3rd month, humanity broke its silence. A single message was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. It was not long. It did not contain threats or demands or explanations. It was simply an image of a wolf, gray and lean and hungry, running through snow. Its golden eyes were fixed forward, locked onto something in the distance. Beneath the image was a single word in every language known to the galactic community. Coming. High Sovereign Kethral received the message in his throne room. He stared at it for a long time. The creature in the image was not impressive. It was smaller than a Velkari hunting beast. Its teeth were not particularly large. Its claws were not particularly sharp, but there was something in those golden eyes that made his scales feel cold. For the first time in his long life, Kethral felt something he did not recognize. It took him several minutes to understand what it was. It was fear. The first attack came without warning. A Velkari supply station on the edge of their territory simply stopped responding to communications. When a patrol ship arrived to investigate, they found the station dark and empty. The crew of 47 had vanished. The cargo holds had been emptied. The computer systems had been wiped clean. There was only one thing left behind: a small piece of paper, pinned to the command chair with a knife. On it was written a single number: 29,953. The Velkari did not understand what the number meant. They would learn soon enough. Over the next 2 weeks, 17 more stations went dark. Fuel depots exploded without explanation. Communication relays failed at critical moments. Supply ships vanished between jump points and were never seen again. The Velkari Dominion controlled 40 star systems. They had 400 warships and millions of soldiers. They had never lost a war in their entire history, and now they were being torn apart by an enemy they could not see. Admiral Kethsul gathered the largest fleet in Velkari history. 200 ships, carrying 50,000 soldiers. He would find the human attackers and crush them in open battle. This was the Velkari way. This was how wars were supposed to be fought. He searched for 3 weeks. He found nothing. The humans did not fight like the Velkari expected. They did not form battle lines. They did not challenge enemy fleets to honorable combat. They struck from the shadows and disappeared before anyone could respond. They hit targets that seemed unimportant until suddenly the entire supply chain collapsed. They are cowards, Kethsul declared. They refuse to face us like true warriors. But the old advisor Vethran shook his head. They are not cowards. They are hunters. They are bleeding us slowly, weakening us piece by piece. They will not attack until we are too weak to fight back. That is not war, Kethsul spat. That is murder. To them, there is no difference. The truth about humanity began to spread through the Velkari military. Soldiers whispered stories in the dark corridors of their ships. They talked about the human persistence, the way they never seemed to stop or rest. They talked about captured intelligence reports that showed human crews operating in shifts for weeks without returning to port. When one group slept, another took their place. The ships never stopped moving. The attacks never stopped coming. One captured human pilot was brought before Admiral Kethsul for questioning. She was a small woman with red hair and pale skin covered in freckles. Her hands were bound, and there was blood on her face. But she did not look afraid. Why do you fight like this? Kethsul demanded. Why do you hide and run like prey animals? The woman looked up at him with steady eyes. We are not hiding. We are hunting. You cannot win. We have more ships. We have more soldiers. We have more resources. For now. She smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. Do you know why your ancestors were afraid of the dark? Do you know why every species in the galaxy has legends about monsters that hunt in the night? Kethsul said nothing. Because something was hunting them. Something that could not be seen. Something that could not be stopped. Something that followed and never gave up. She leaned forward against her restraints. We are that something. We have always been that something. You just made us remember. She was executed the next day. But her words spread through the fleet like a disease. The attacks continued. Each time, the humans left behind a piece of paper with a number on it. The numbers were always different, but they were always decreasing. 29,953, then 28,841, then 27,756, then 26,502. It took the Velkari intelligence officers 2 months to understand what the numbers meant. They were counting down the dead from Kepler 442b. Each number represented how many humans still needed to be avenged. Each attack was payment for the lives that had been lost. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were keeping score. When High Sovereign Kethral learned this, he threw his advisor across the room in rage. This is madness. They cannot expect to kill 30,000 of us for every one of them that died. But that was exactly what they expected. And they were making progress. 6 months into the war, the Velkari had lost 63 ships. They had lost over 12,000 soldiers. They had lost 19 supply stations, 47 communication relays, and 3 entire mining operations. Their economy was beginning to crack. Their soldiers were beginning to desert. And still the humans came. Captain Elena Vasquez led her ship through the burning wreckage of a Velkari convoy. Her crew had been awake for 36 hours straight. They were exhausted and hungry and running low on ammunition. But they did not complain. They did not ask to rest. Captain, her first officer reported, we have destroyed the convoy. Enemy losses are estimated at 247. Elena nodded. She pulled out a small notebook and crossed off numbers. That brings the count down to 19,812. We are making progress. Not fast enough. She closed the notebook and put it back in her pocket. Set course for the next target. We rest when this is finished. The Velkari began to call the humans by a new name. They called them the Endless Ones. They called them the Ghosts Who Count. They called them the Wolves of Soul. Admiral Kethsul sent a formal request for peace negotiations. The human response arrived 3 days later. It was a simple image, the same wolf from before, but now it was closer. Its eyes filled the entire frame. Beneath it was a single word: no. Kethsul sent another request, and another, and another. Each time the response was the same. The humans would not negotiate. They would not accept surrender. They would not stop. High Sovereign Kethral called an emergency meeting of his war council. The great generals and admirals of the Velkari Dominion gathered in the throne room of bones and tried to find a solution. "We must strike at their homeworld," one general suggested. "Destroy Earth, and the war ends." "We cannot," another admiral replied. "They have fortified their system. Our scouts cannot even get close. And even if we could break through, they have scattered their population across a dozen hidden colonies. Destroying Earth would only make them angrier. Then what do we do?" Silence filled the chamber. No one had an answer. Old Vethran stood slowly. His scales had grown dull with stress, and his eyes were tired. "I warned you," he said quietly. "I told you not to provoke them. I told you what the Council's warning meant. The Council was wrong," Kethral snapped. "They said the humans were dangerous. They did not say they were impossible to defeat. They said do not allow them reason to remember what they are." Vethran shook his head sadly. "You gave them a reason. You killed their children. And now they remember. They remember that they are the thing that other predators fear. They remember that they are the species that never stops hunting." He walked toward the door of the throne room. "There is no strategy that will save us now. There is no weapon that will stop them. We can only hope that when they have finished, there will be something left of us to rebuild." He left the chamber without looking back. 3 days later, he was found dead in his quarters. He had taken his own life rather than watch his empire fall. The war continued, and the numbers kept counting down. The human fleet arrived at Velkar Prime on a cold morning in the 8th month of the war. There were 300 ships. They emerged from folded space like ghosts rising from graves, their hulls painted black, their weapons already charging. For a moment, they simply hung in the darkness above the Velkari homeworld, silent and still. Then Captain Elena Vasquez opened a communication channel and spoke to the planet below. "People of Velkar Prime, 8 months ago, your leaders ordered the destruction of a human colony. 30,000 of our people died. Farmers, teachers, children. They burned in their homes while your soldiers laughed." Her voice was calm. There was no anger in it, no hatred, just a cold, empty certainty. "We have come to collect what is owed. Your leaders may surrender now and face justice, or they may fight, and we will take what we came for anyway. You have 1 hour to decide." High Sovereign Kethral watched the message from his throne room. His scales had grown pale over the past months. He had not slept properly since the war began. Every night he dreamed of wolves chasing him through endless darkness. "How many ships do we have?" he asked. Admiral Kethsul checked his reports. 112, my lord. The rest are scattered across the Dominion, defending our other worlds. Can we win? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. Kethral stood from his throne. He was old and tired, but he was still a warrior. His ancestors had built this empire from nothing. They had conquered species far more powerful than humans. They had never surrendered. They had never run. Then we fight, he said. Send every ship we have. Call back our reserves. Today we show the galaxy that the Velkari Dominion does not bow to prey animals. The Battle of Velkar Prime lasted 11 days. It began in space, with the two fleets crashing together like waves of fire and steel. The Velkari fought with everything they had. Their ships were larger and more heavily armed. Their soldiers were bigger and stronger. They knew they were fighting for their homes, their families, their entire way of life. But the humans fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They adapted in real time. When the Velkari used a new tactic, the humans studied it and found weaknesses within hours. When a human ship was destroyed, 2 more took its place. When human soldiers were cornered, they did not surrender. They fought until their weapons ran dry, then fought with their hands, then fought with their teeth. On the 3rd day, a squad of human marines was trapped in a munitions depot on the planet's surface. There were 37 of them, surrounded by 2,000 Valkyrie soldiers. They had limited ammunition and no hope of rescue. They held that depot for 36 hours. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the 37 humans still standing. They were bleeding and broken, some of them barely able to walk, but they were standing. Around them lay the bodies of over 800 Valkyrie soldiers. The squad leader, a young sergeant named Marcus Cole, looked up at his rescuers with exhausted eyes. "What took you so long?" he asked. Then he collapsed. Stories like this spread through both armies. The Valkyrie began to realize that they were not fighting a normal enemy. They were fighting something that simply refused to stop, something that would rather die than give up, something that seemed to grow stronger with every wound. On the 7th day, the human fleet broke through the orbital defenses. Dropships rained down on Velkar Prime like metal tears. The ground war began. Captain Vasquez led the assault on the capital city herself. She moved through the streets with her rifle raised, her soldiers following close behind. They cleared buildings one by one, room by room. They did not kill civilians. They did not burn homes. They were not here for revenge against innocent people. They were here for the ones who had given the orders. On the 9th day, they reached the Bone Citadel. The fortress was massive, built from the remains of countless defeated enemies. Its walls were thick and strong. Its defenders were the elite guard of the High Sovereign, the best soldiers in the entire Dominion. Elena looked up at the citadel and felt something cold move through her chest. Somewhere in there was the creature who had ordered the death of her sister. Somewhere in there was the monster who had killed her nephews. "Take it down," she ordered. The assault lasted 2 days. The human soldiers pushed forward inch by inch, paying for every meter with blood. They lost hundreds of their own, but they did not stop. They could not stop. They had come too far. On the 11th day, Captain Vasquez kicked open the doors of the throne room. High Sovereign Kethril stood before his throne of bones. He was alone. His guards were dead. His advisors had fled. His empire was burning around him, but he still held a blade in his clawed hand, and his eyes still burned with defiance. "So," he said, "the prey has come to claim the predator." Elena walked toward him slowly. Her armor was dented and scarred. Her face was covered in dust and blood, but her eyes were steady. "You killed 30,000 of us," she said. "Farmers, teachers, children. They were weak. They stood in our way. They were families. They were building a life. They had never hurt anyone." Kethril laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. "And now you have killed millions of us. How are you any different?" Elena stopped a few meters from the throne. She looked at the walls built from bones. She thought about her sister, her nephews, all the people who had died on Kepler 442b. "I never said we were different," she replied. "I just said we were better at it." She raised her rifle. "Wait," Kethril said. There was something new in his voice now, something that sounded almost like curiosity. "Before you kill me, I must know. What are you? What kind of creatures fight like this? What kind of species refuses to stop, refuses to surrender, refuses to show mercy?" Elena lowered her rifle slightly. She reached up and removed her helmet, letting him see her face clearly. It was a young face, scarred and tired, but also something else, something ancient. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes." She looked at him with those dark, hard eyes. "We are humans. We are the species that taught ourselves to run until our prey collapsed from exhaustion. We are the species that climbed down from trees and decided to become the deadliest predators on our planet. We are the species that crossed oceans on wooden ships, that walked on the surface of our moon, that built machines to think for us." She stepped closer. "We are the species that loves fiercely and grieves deeply. We carve our sorrow into monuments that last for thousands of years. We name stars after our dead. We tell stories about them until the end of time." She raised her rifle again. "And we are the species that never, ever forgets." The shot echoed through the throne room of bones. High Sovereign Kethril, ruler of the Valkyrie Dominion, conqueror of 40 worlds, fell to the floor and did not move again. Captain Elena Vasquez stood over his body for a long moment. She felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a cold emptiness where her rage had been. She pulled out her notebook and crossed off the final number. "It is done," she said quietly. "It is finally done." Outside the citadel, the guns fell silent. The war was over. The Velkari Dominion surrendered unconditionally 3 days after the fall of the Bone Citadel. The terms were harsh but not cruel. The humans did not glass their worlds. They did not enslave their population. They did not build thrones from Velkari bones. That was not the human way. Instead, they demanded justice. Admiral Kethsul and 47 other military officers were put on trial for the massacre of Kepler 442b. The trials were broadcast across the galaxy. Every species watched as the evidence was presented, as the footage was shown, as the survivors of the human fleet testified about what they had seen. The trials lasted 3 months. At the end, Kethsul and 32 others were found guilty of crimes against sentient life. They were executed by firing squad. It was quick and clean, more mercy than they had shown the colonists. The remaining Velkari leaders signed a treaty that would reshape their entire civilization. Their military was reduced to a defensive force. Their weapons of mass destruction were destroyed. They were required to build memorials on every planet in their empire, monuments to the 30,000 humans who had died on Kepler 442b, and they were required to teach their children the truth. Every Velkari school would include lessons about the massacre, about the war that followed, about the price of cruelty. Future generations would grow up knowing exactly what their ancestors had done, and exactly what it had cost them. Some Velkari leaders complained that the terms were too harsh. Captain Vasquez, who had been promoted to admiral by then, met with them personally. "You killed our children," she said simply. "We could have killed all of yours. Consider this mercy." They did not complain again. The Galactic Council convened for the first time in over 10,000 years. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the ancient halls. Beings of light and shadow and crystal and flesh. They had watched the war with growing unease. They had seen what humanity could do when provoked. Now they needed to decide what to do about it. Ambassador Yithra of the Conclave stood before the assembly. Her silver skin caught the light as she moved, and her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "We warned the Velkari," she said. "We told them not to provoke the humans. We told them what would happen if they did. They did not listen, and now their empire lies in ruins." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the assembly. "But this council is not here to discuss the Velkari. We are here to discuss the humans. We are here to decide how they should be classified in the Codex of Known Species." The Codex was the oldest document in the galaxy. It contained information about every sentient species ever discovered, organized by their potential threat level. Most species were classified as harmless or minor. Some were classified as moderate or significant. A very few were classified as major. No species had ever been classified as apex. An elder being, ancient beyond measure, spoke from the shadows at the back of the chamber. Its voice was like wind through dead leaves. "I remember when the humans first learned to walk upright. I remember when they first discovered fire. I remember when they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there." The being shifted, its form flickering. "I also remember the warnings. The ancient warnings. Older than this council. Older than most of the species in this room." "What warnings?" asked a young delegate. "Warnings about a species that would one day rise from a small blue planet. A species that would conquer not through strength or speed or natural weapons, but through something else entirely. Through persistence, through adaptation, through a capacity for both love and violence that no other species could match." The chamber fell silent. The warning said that this species should be avoided at all costs. That if they were ever given reason to fight, they would not stop until the fight was over. That they would burn their own ships before retreating. That they would sacrifice everything, including themselves, to protect what they loved. The ancient being leaned forward, and its eyes glowed with something that might have been fear. The warning said that this species was not a predator like other predators. It was something worse. It was a predator that could choose to be kind. A predator that built schools and hospitals and parks for children. A predator that wrote poetry and painted pictures and fell in love. It paused, and the warning said that this made them more dangerous than anything else in the universe. Because when you threaten what they love, you unleash something that cannot be bargained with, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped. Ambassador Yithra nodded slowly. "Then you agree with my proposal?" "I do." She turned to face the full assembly. "I move that humanity be classified in the Codex of Known Species under a category that has never been used before. I move that they be classified as apex." The vote was unanimous. On Earth, the celebrations were muted. There were no parades, no fireworks, no songs of victory. The war had cost too much for joy. Admiral Elena Vasquez traveled to Kepler 442b 1 year after the end of the war. The planet was still scarred from the bombardment, but green things were beginning to grow again. Rain had washed away the ash. Seeds had taken root in the soil. Life was returning. In the center of what had once been the colony, there was now a memorial. It was a simple wall of black stone, stretching for nearly a kilometer. On it were carved 30,000 names. Elena walked along the wall slowly, reading each name. She found her sister's name near the middle. She found her nephew's names just below. She stood there for a long time, her hand pressed against the cold stone. A journalist had followed her to the planet. He was a young man, eager for a story, hoping to capture the famous admiral in a moment of emotion. "Admiral Vasquez," he called out. "The galaxy is calling humanity the apex species now. They say we are the most dangerous beings in the known universe. How does that make you feel?" Elena did not turn around. She kept her hand on the wall, on the names of the people she had loved. "I did not fight this war to make humans feared," she said. "I fought it because 30,000 people were murdered for no reason. I fought it because my sister was killed while planting flowers in her garden. I fought it because my nephews were burned alive while playing in a wheat field." She finally turned to face the journalist. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Do you want to know what makes humans truly dangerous? It is not our weapons. It is not our ships. It is not our tactics or our technology." She pointed at the wall of names behind her. "It is our memory. We remember every name. We remember every face. We remember every kindness and every cruelty. We carve our grief into pyramids that outlast empires. We name constellations after our dead. We tell their stories for thousands of years." She walked closer to the journalist. "The Velkari thought they could kill 30,000 of us and we would forget. They thought we were soft and weak and cowardly. They did not understand that our softness is not our weakness. It is the source of our strength. We are soft because we love, and when that love is wounded..." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The journalist swallowed hard. "Will you ever forgive them? The Velkari, I mean." Elena looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to come out, tiny points of light in the gathering darkness. "Forgive? Perhaps. Someday. When the last memorial has been built. When the last story has been told. When the last child has learned what happened here and sworn to never let it happen again." She paused. "But forget." A small smile crossed her face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had seen too much and survived anyway. "We are human. We never forget." She turned and walked back toward her ship, leaving the journalist alone with 30,000 names and a galaxy that would never look at humanity the same way again. In the ancient halls of the Galactic Council, the new entry in the Codex of Known Species glowed on the great screen. Species. Human. Homeworld. Earth. Sol system. Classification. Apex. Special notes. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not allow them reason to remember what they are. And below that, added by Ambassador Yithra herself, they are the species that builds monuments. They are the species that remembers names. They are the species that loves fiercely and grieves eternally. They are the wolves at the edge of the firelight, and now the firelight belongs to them.